everyone will. There we go. Super. So now we'll flip back over and get our presentation started. And here we go. So, like I said, Jim and I are with the Association Member Benefits Advisors, and we're actually endorsed by your Ohio Retired Teachers Association. But even beyond that, here in Ohio, we also work with the School Employee Retirees, the Public Employee Retirees Incorporated, and the Police and Fire Retirees of Ohio. And actually, for over 40 years, AMBA has been working with associations throughout the United States. And right now, we're up to over 70 different associations in 36 states. So what does that mean to all of you folks? Basically, when one of our associations comes to us and says, hey, we've got a problem, we need a solution, AMBA goes out and finds those solutions and then brings them back. And really what Jim and I and the other 24 folks on our teams here in Ohio do is to help make sure that our retirees understand, what potential problems or gaps there might be out there, and also have you understand the value of your association. And we're incredibly fortunate this morning to have Robin with us to give us an update on what the Ohio Retired Teachers Association is doing for each of you. So Robin, I'm going to turn it over. I know there's been a lot of things going on, so go ahead and update us on what's been happening with the Retired Teachers Association and what's about to happen.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie and Jim, for having me on, and thanks to AMBA for our long partnership that we've enjoyed. We're always excited when our people can hear a presentation about a product or an opportunity that can enrich their lives in retirement. On the ORTA side of things, we're busy preparing for our 75th year anniversary. ORTA began in 1947, and actually ORTA began as a state organization affiliated with the National Retired Teachers Association, which oddly enough is the parent company of AARP. So we have an opportunity every other year to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with I'll call them the leadership teams of NRTA and AARP. Now, I won't be able to go this year, but ORTA will be represented. Some of our executive committee member and a statewide liaison will be attending. It happens to fall on the day that STRS meets, and with our newly elected majority board coming on, that ORTA endorsed, and we were successful in the campaign. We're excited to be there, and I want to show support for those state elected trustees. However, on October 12th, the screen shows that we're having a celebration. It won't be a typical ORTA meeting. You won't come in and have business, etc. It'll be a celebration time. Currently, we have two STRS trustees, Wade Steen and Rudy Fichtenbaum, who will say a few words to the people that attend. And we also have State Senator Teresa Fetter, who will address the group. All the speechifying won't last very long. It'll be more of a, think of a wedding. It's going to be a time for celebration and camaraderie. It's free to everyone who will make the trek to Columbus. It's going to be at the Worthington, Doubletree Inn. All of this information is on our website, so we're excited that we'll have people there. Again, there'll be refreshments and snacks for everyone. It'll be from it'll start at 4 o'clock, and we want to get people on the road before dark. So those that drive any distance will be able to get home before it gets too late in the evening. And for those that want to stay overnight, certainly the Doubletree is a very nice hotel, and they have a special rate set up for the ORTA participants. So that's one big piece of news. Another big piece of news is we're currently in, I'll call it regional meetings all around the state. We meet in the 5 regions: Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, and Central. And we're having regional meetings of each chapter is invited to come in and share ideas about membership or what's working, what isn't. And we get an update from AMBA there, and any news that we can share, we're happy to share. To that end, we're I don't know if we're rejoicing or if we're running a victory lap or if we're just what we're doing, but we are very excited that at the election this spring in May, just a couple of months ago, ORTA's endorsed candidates won 3 of the seats that were up for election. Now, that may not seem like a major change, but we had 3 reform-minded people that are on the board now, giving us, we think, a narrow majority. What's interesting is that we didn't have any money. ORTA doesn't have money to spend on elections. So we didn't expend money trying to get elected. However, the other candidates who were endorsed by the OEA spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps even in the range of over $1 million. They took out TV ads and did mailings, and staff from STRS did their best to try to defeat the ORTA candidates. But I think our message of change, of cultural change, of systemic change was overpowering. We're no longer going to accept the notion that investors get paid a bonus whether they earn a bonus or not. We're no longer going to accept that everyone at STRS gets paid first, and if there's any money left over, they'll send retirees some money. We're rejecting that. And so we look for dramatic change in the upcoming months. Now, our candidates don't take their seats until September's meeting. So this, in 2 days, STRS will meet, and it is the last meeting with the people who were turned out at the election. ORTA has monitored this loss of COLA and erosion of benefits over the last 5 years very carefully. And as I don't have to tell the people on this call, we're facing the worst inflation that really has happened, you might say, in my lifetime. you can go back to the misery index of the 1973 and probably find something very similar. However, I was a high school student, and inflation didn't mean anything to me. I was pumping gas, so I do remember gas lines, and I remember gas being very high. I think at where I worked, it was 34 cents a gallon, which we'd all we'd all be excited to see that. But right now, we do face a major obstacle coming just in 2 days. STRS has management has put on the agenda to pay themselves nearly $10 million in bonus this year. Now, what's interesting is STRS lost money this year. We all watch the market and we know that the market is down. ORTA sits back, we look at this and we say, how in the world can we be paying out a bonus when our performance is to lose money? It doesn't make sense. Now, we're hoping that people will reach out to their STRS trustees and say, reject that proposal. I don't know. My suspicion is that they'll force it through and thumb their nose at the people who voted against them and push those bonuses through. But we're clearly standing against the payment of those bonuses. So I don't want to call it a call to action, but we are encouraging people to reach out to the STRS board members. And call them, send them an email, and ask that they not approve those bonuses. Either way, come September, a new day will dawn for STRS, and we will continue to stay active in the election of trustees for STRS. We're not political people. I know very little about politics, and that's by choice. I don't like politics. But yet when decisions are made that impact our retirement, I think we have to stand up and be counted. So with that, I'll step out and we'll listen to the presentation on MASA. It is a great product. Many of our people, it's probably one of the more popular offerings that AMBA has, and I'll sit back and learn more about it.
Well, Robin, as always, you are so informative, and thank you so much for watching the backs of our retirees. So, we look forward to being at the regional meetings, and several of us have also had the opportunity to join those local chapter meetings, which are so important to the association. So it's nice to get out and see folks again as we make our way around the state. So we'll go ahead and get started here, folks. Robin shared a little bit about him, and just to make sure that folks understand who we are here at AMBA. We talked a little bit about the association, but on a personal level, we talked about school being back first day of school, and Jim and I are both fortunate. We have college students, but this is my baby. He's actually will be a sophomore starting next week here at Miami University in Oxford. And I do have to say, he's on the football team, so technically he's an academic junior, but academically, or Yeah, academically, he's a junior, but on the football team, he's actually a redshirt freshman. So that's hard for mom to wrap her head around, especially when he's 6'4" and, doing all this. And I will say, if you do, folks do hear a strange noise, this is my little 15-pound supervisor. So sometimes he does take a little morning nap. So, he chimes in once in a while too. I guess that's the beauty of having, work from home type things. And then Jim, tell us about your ladies here.
Good morning, everybody. This is my family. My wife is about 6 feet tall. I'm not on my knees. She's not on a chair. People have heard me say that if you've tuned in before. But my wife, Mamie, is actually an educator in Reynoldsburg, and our two daughters, the one on the left is now a sophomore at OU down in Athens, and the one on the right, also taller than me now, is a senior in Gahanna High School here in Columbus. Thanks.
So lots of changes here as we start the year. And, just to reiterate, about the association, it is so important for folks to, be members of their retirees association, because those associations do a lot for each of our retirees. And really, we wanted to pause just a moment and remind folks of that, because, your association, as you heard from Robin, they are truly your pension watchdogs. While you folks are out there maybe still doing some substitute teaching or chasing after grandbabies or traveling or, doing all of those volunteer things that now you're like, oh, wow, I don't even know how I had time to work. Your Retired Teachers Association is really in there, watching what's going on with your pension. And you truly do have a watchdog here. And another thing, your association is looking to preserve your health benefits. And then as we talked, our local chapters are again starting to meet in the regional meetings. So, your association provides those connections to retirees there on the local community level. And Jim, I know one of the things I'm always impressed with as I visit the chapter meetings is just the number of hours of community service that our retirees continue to do. And even through the pandemic, how they were really able to make an impact on their communities. So, a great association here. And then, the other thing, through the partnership with the association member benefits, which, it is represented by Jim and I today, your association can bring you those important and exclusive benefits, and then a lot of discounts too. And we will make sure that everyone receives one of the benefit sheets today in email, if you provided us that email address, just so you can see all of the different types of discount programs. Really, membership has its benefits here. And so, and this is the sheet that we'll make sure that we send out to everyone. But as we look at this, these are a number of those group negotiated benefits. And, why is your association so concerned about this? Well, there's a lot of times that, these things can fill the gaps not covered by your state or your district benefits, or even, perhaps you're still on a spouse's employer insurance. And sometimes what I've found is, as we've worked with folks across the state, some districts did not allow you to take some of those benefits that you had made the good decision to put in place, but then you retired from your local district and they said, oh yeah, you can't take this with you. And sometimes even if you leave the state for whatever reason, and I know, Jim, on these webinars, we do get a lot of folks from outside the state of Ohio, but sometimes when you move to another state, things that you had aren't necessarily portable. And then another thing that happens, because you're members of the association, we can actually extend benefits to your parents or family members who may not be eligible for the benefits that they once had too. We just ask them to become a member of the ORTA, and then they have access to all of these benefits. And then finally, some of these things work to help our members and their family members, because there's a lot of folks out there that as we visit with retirees, they're actually almost that sandwich generation. So, if we can help anything to prevent you or maybe a loved one from having to take extended time off or away from the family to care for a loved one, every day we meet folks that are having to care for an elderly parent, or, perhaps a child with special needs, or, even a spouse who has been struck by, some type of disease or illness. And today, one of the things we're going to talk about is the Medical Air Services Association, and really, how what medical transportation means. We're going to touch on MASA and talk about that concept of emergency transport, because a lot of times, Jim, people just don't understand who pays or who doesn't pay in many situations, and the concept, around this thing called the golden hour. And so, like every good classroom preparation, we have our goals that we want to accomplish today. And we're going to discuss that golden hour and what it really means to you. We're going to identify those issues and costs of emergency medical transportation. And, folks, one of the things that Jim and I and the folks that we work with set out every day, we always say we never want one of our retirees to be blindsided. And we sure don't want you paying money that you don't have to. You've worked way too hard over the years, and Robin and the rest of the ORTA board, works hard to protect your pension. And we just want to make sure that you're not spending money you don't have to. We're also going to talk about locating those level 1 trauma centers here in Ohio, talk about the myths and the realities of insurance, different types of insurance, and even Medicare, and how they relate to emergency transportation. And then, how can you have peace of mind? And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe doing a benefits review, because as everybody knows, here in the fall, there's a lot of, you'll be bombarded by telemarketers and, 20 phone calls a day and 10 pounds of mail. And what does that really mean? And what, how can we here at AMBA help you sort through all of that noise? So, Jim, one of the things that we've talked about is this golden hour. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, the golden hour, and for those of you, some of you guys know me. In fact, I'm going to make one clarification. A couple of people texted me and asked, what was MRTA at the top of that benefits list? As Bonnie shared, we work very closely with 37 other states, retired educators and public employee groups. Bonnie and I, when we were putting this presentation together, actually snagged a couple of the slides from some of the more affluent MASA presentations, and one that we took out was from Missouri. They have some very limiting medical transports, so that instead of saying ORTA, you've got the Missouri Retired Teacher Association benefits, but they're identical to everybody, just for clarification. So I actually started my career in 1985 as a paramedic. I had some health issues as a kid, and I didn't really think I wanted to go to college. So I became a medic. I wanted to give back to the healthcare community, and I got my EMTA and then my EMTP and became a paramedic. Unfortunately, because of my health, I was really small and I couldn't lift my diabetic patients, and I ended up going to school about 8 months later and got my degree. But in that year, the first thing we learned was about the golden hour. The golden hour was, we believe, coined by R. Adams Crowley, a physician, and basically determined that hour immediately following a traumatic injury, in which medical treatment for preventing irreversible internal damage, brain damage, neurological deficits, and optimizing the chance of survival is most effective. It significantly increases your chances of survival if you can get to a major hospital able to treat that event, illness, injury, whatever it is, within 60 minutes of the event. You can go ahead and go to the next one, Bonnie. Obviously, emergent medical transport costs are rising. They're going through the roof. Understand that Medicare, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but Medicare is going to cover your basic life support. Medicare does not cover advanced life support. These costs, like I said, are increasing. The biggest thing that people don't understand is when you do a med flight, they have something called a rotor charge. And that's literally just starting the engines and making that vehicle available to you in an emergent situation. And oftentimes that rotor charge alone is $25,000 or $30,000. When you hear these horror stories of people getting ridiculous bills to get to Columbus, Toledo, Cincinnati, Cleveland, that's exactly what this is. Given the limited number of trauma centers in Ohio, it costs more to get our rural members to one of the major cities. I believe last year, Ohioans paid over $25 million in non-Medicare covered emergent medical transport expenses. You can go on to the next one, Bonnie. So sky high bills. New York Times article actually featured an Ohioan. Air Methods, which is was a local company, hard edge legal tactics to get paid. They go into lawsuits across the country trying to get their money. A gentleman by the name of Mark Dodson, again featured in a New York Times article, said that they hounded us forever. He ended up filing for bankruptcy in 2013 to avoid a $22,150 bill after his wife was injured. It's just ridiculous. We hear these stories on a weekly basis.
And Jim, for those who don't know their Ohio geography, Butlerville is actually in Warren County, so down here closer to me. So it does happen right here in our backyard.
Oh yeah, we get stories from every county. I mean, I've been doing this 9.5 years for AMBA, Ohio Retired Teachers, and the public pension protection systems, and I have had countless members that have had. I can't tell you the number of people that show me when we used to meet people in their kitchen tables, come out and show me a $30,000 bill that they're making $350 payments on for the next 2 or 3 years, to cover that. So emergency medical transport facts. If you look at that chart, 59% of women will use emergent medical transport, 41% of men. Now, we're not talking about, a trip to your doctor, a trip to your therapist, one of the little cart rides, in one of the little minivans. This is actually emergent, basic, or advanced life support to get you to a major center. There's 5 reasons why, retirees typically require emergent medical transport. Number one, far and away, heart and stroke. Heart and stroke, we call them the big two. 90% of us will meet our maker because of one of those 2 events and typically require emergent medical transport. Neurological disorder. It could be a head injury, brain injury. It could be Alzheimer's, senility, a fall. Parkinson's, senility, dementia, a fall, especially not so much this time of year, but falls increase dramatically around the November through February months. We have more claims and more emergent medical transports with folks getting ridiculous bills during the winter months simply because of falls. Traumatic events, car accidents, falls, major injuries, anything. And as of the last 3 years, respiratory distress. COVID has even younger folks are dealing with emergent medical transports and getting ridiculous bills because they're going into respiratory distress based on one of the different, Omicron or 19 variants of COVID. Go ahead, Bonnie. So what are the facts? The bottom line is the further that you live from a trauma hospital, the more expensive it's going to be. So let's talk a little bit about, hospitals in Ohio. There are hundreds of hospitals in Ohio. We'll go to a slide in a minute that's only going to show there's only 7 traumas. So what are your different levels of facility? You've heard of level 1, which I don't know why you can't see it on here, but a level 1 is a teaching hospital like Ohio State University, the Cleveland Clinic. They have specialty staff on staff 24 hours a day. No matter what you step into, you walk into the ER, somebody's able to help you with that specific discipline. A level 2 trauma is not a teaching hospital. They typically have the same equipment, but they don't have the specialist on staff 24/7. That's where you're waiting and they're calling a doctor out of sleep to come in, and take care of your situation. That's typically a level 2. Now, a level 3 and a level 4, those are basically, there's no specialist. They have some equipment, but it's limited. But basically what they're going to do is stabilize you for transport. And when they stabilize you for transport, that's pretty much when your Medicare dollars end. Understand that Medicare will typically, and I want to say, in most cases, typically cover you from your event to your closest hospital. Well, with 97% of the hospitals in Ohio and other states being rural, non-trauma, there's a very good chance that if you have more than a cut, a break, a bump, or a bruise, anything significant, you're coming to Cleveland, Toledo, Cincinnati, or Columbus. And then, of course, we have, 2 other trauma centers that are closer to Akron and then over toward the PA border. But if you look at the map of Ohio, we have hundreds of hospitals, but only 7, if you look at the red dots, only 7 level 1 trauma centers. And I know I know it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There might be 8. I know on the bottom it says that there's 12. I believe there's only 8 in the state right now. If you look at the areas, and Bonnie, you can use your cursor. If you kind of circle your territory, yep, and then you circle the right area by, you know, Tuscarawas, Guernsey, Belmont, Harrison, Jefferson, those areas have no trauma capability. Not a level 1, not a level 2, not a level 3, not a level 4. If you have anything more than a cut, a break, a bump, or a bruise, you can typically count on a second trip, and that's where you have skin in the game. Now, for that first trip, Medicare will typically cover that first trip closest hospital. If you're on a Medicare supplement, like a plan F, G, N, you know, those, they typically are going to cover that 100%. If you're on an Advantage plan, like the STRS Aetna, the SERO Aetna, or anything else, you're typically going to have copays about 20%. Now, why am I not covered by my insurance? Why do we have these gaps? Believe it or not, Medicare has 3 major gaps in present day Medicare. Where Bonnie and I spend most of our time is actually elder care, home health, assisted living, nursing home. It's the #1 reason for medical bankruptcy. But right behind it, not quite as catastrophic, but even used more, is medical transport. Now, commercial policies, which is anything other than Medicare, including Medicare, will have something called usual and customary charges. Well, what we have to realize is, unfortunately, these medical transport providers are not using networks. They're regulated by the FAA, no longer Medicare. It's been that way since the late 70s. So they're not part of a network. They're not accustomed to usual and customary charges. So if your plan will pay up to usual and customary charges, let's say that usual and customary charges is $3,500. Well, if your bill is $40,000, Medicare is going to pay usual and customary charges at $3,500. You are responsible for the $36,500 remaining that's ultimately not on what we call their fee schedule. Medicare's language is very tricky. Payments are based on an approved set fee schedule. And what we say that is, and we'll get to a page of Medicare and You, but they've actually changed a couple words in the verbiage, that instead of saying they will pay for these things, Medicare says it may pay for these things. Bonnie, I'm going to have you back up one. I'm going to make one more point with the other page. Thank you. So if the provider charges more than the schedule allows, you're responsible for that difference. And of course, coverage depends on the seriousness of the medical condition and whether you could have been safely transported by other means, like a car or a taxi. So I'm going to use an example of a lady in Gahanna, east side of Columbus, over the winter, February, March. We had one more little snow. She went out on her porch to get her mail. She stepped on her porch, slipped, fell, caught herself, broke her wrist and her clavicle. And her neighbor saw her out the window, saw her fall. She wasn't getting up. She was in the snow, dialed 911, went over there and got her up, dusted her off. And she was standing there. Medics came up and said, "You want to be transported?" She said, "Yep, I sure do." They transported her. Her bill was declined by Medicare. The reason being is she broke her wrist and her clavicle, neither of which limited her mobility to get in a car, a cab, an Uber, or even have that neighbor that picked her off and dusted her off take her. Her $1,280 bill to the local Mount Carmel East, which was only 6 miles away, was declined, and she was responsible for that. So understand, and the next slide that Bonnie's going to switch to actually shows the Medicare and You 2022 guidelines. And what we want to share with you is that Medicare will cover ground transportation when you need to be covered to a hospital, critical illness, nursing facility, medically necessary. But the word they changed was, instead of will pay, now it's may pay. In some cases, Medicare may pay for limited transportation. That's a big change, guys. Where 10 years ago, that little lady slipping on her porch would have been covered. It's no longer covered. So obviously the situation's the boss. And again, if you look at the bottom, Medicare, shares that you're still going to pay 20% of the approved amount. And I want you to think about, knock on wood, but a $40,000 med flight, even if Medicare pays it because it was your first and not advanced life support, if they don't pay it, you're on the hook for the entire thing. But even if they do, 20% of $40,000 is $8,000. for a lot of our retirees on budgets, that makes a big impact. And unfortunately, you can't call the pension system and say, hey, I had an unexpected $40,000 medical transport. Can you tweak my pension for the year? Unfortunately, you can't. That's on you. And obviously your Part B deductible, which is $233 this year, also applies. Thanks,
So
Bonnie.
Jim, if I can ask a question here, I know several of our retirees that are on our call this morning may be on a plan that has a maximum out of pocket of 1,500 or 2,500 if they're out of network. How does that really relate to the situation you just described?
Yeah, just like you said, that is their in and out of network. Now, understand these medical transports, they are not in a network at all. We just kind of discussed the usual and customary charges. So you will get that bill. Medicare, like I said, may pay a portion of it, but you guys, as retired educators, those on the Aetna PPO, if you're in Ohio, you have a max out of pocket of $1,500. The first bill you are going to get is customarily your medical transport. That was the first thing, the easiest to bill for you. You're going to get that first. Well, not only will this pay whatever, so you're not paying out of that $1,500, but believe it or not, we have actually had some of our retirees use their MASA receipt to pay their deductible. So when Aetna says, hey, Mary, you owe us $1,500, that's your max out of pocket for your Aetna PPO. She can say, I paid that. Well, how'd you pay that? Well, I paid for my ambulance to get me to Columbus. Holy cow, how much was it? I don't know, but I paid it. You call us, you call MASA, we get you the receipt, you send it into Aetna. Not only did MASA pay the bill that you would have normally had to pay, but it just paid your deductible. So it not only saved you the $1,000 or multi-$1,000, for medical transport, but it saved you $1,500 by leveraging it to use up for your deductible under your Aetna plan.
And Jim, just to clarify, if regardless if you're on any PPO plan, those deductibles really only apply to charges that are approved, correct? If Medicare declines the charge, then what portion of the bill is the patient responsible for?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. If Medicare declines a charge, that means your supplement, your Aetna plan will decline the charge. That is 100% patient responsibility. And that's often why you see these little pre-approval is required before we're going to accept payment. Well, in an emergent situation, nobody is calling for pre-approval. And that's where you take the risk that Medicare may or may not pay those bills. I have people call me every week and say, hey, Jim, I read about this. I got my letter from ORTA or CIRO or public employees. Is this really important? And I try to explain to our members that, we don't have seminars on broken legs insurance. We don't have seminars on diabetes insurance. And the reason is those are covered. We do seminars on elder care, medical transport, cancer, talking about the big gaps in Medicare, and it's what our members need to address. Now, one thing that shocked me when I was doing this years ago, because when I was a medic, there was no difference. Medicare paid for everything, whether it's basic life support, advanced life support. Unfortunately, things are much different now. And a lot of people say, well, why wasn't this covered? Why isn't this covered? It was covered for my parents or was covered for my dad. Well, in 2013, the Congressional Budget Office released that they had made $716 billion in cuts between 2013 and 2022 in Medicare. And a lot of that's because of the baby boomers. Baby boomers are just absolutely sucking the life out of Medicare. So what's the difference between basic life support that your plan will cover, getting you to your local hospital, or advanced life support, of which is patient responsibility, as is that second or tertiary trip? Basic life support, CPR, artificial ventilations, putting oxygen on you, basic airway management, spinal immobilization, putting the neck brace on you, putting on a backboard, taking your vital signs, bandaging up or splitting a break or a major cut, obstetrics, blood glucose monitoring for us diabetics. I'm diabetic, albuterol treatments, which are obviously steroids for your lungs if you're dealing with COVID or any asthma or respiratory allergy distress. But advanced life support. This is where we actually have bills coming to us and we're responsible for that medical transport. And if you think about it, common sense, what's more expensive, basic life support or advanced life support? Of course, it's advanced, and that's what we're charged with. So any EKG, people used to call it ECG monitoring, electrocardiogram monitoring, manual defibrillation, advanced airway management, external transcutaneous pacing. I actually had to look that up this morning and I still don't understand it. Fluid therapy, IV needle chest compression, and then obviously administration of critical care medications, pain medications, Narcan, any major, injections, advanced life support. It's a paramedics required, and again, is not covered by Medicare. And a shock to a lot of our members, I'll tell you what's crazy is we get calls in every day, and there is nobody that doesn't understand that if I need home health, nursing home, or some type of elder care, they know they're going to pay for it because their parents have. They've gone through it with mom and dad and aunts and uncles. Nobody seems to understand where Medicare starts and stops with medical transport because it's only changed in the last 9 or 10 years. And a lot of our members haven't taken those emergent medical transports yet, but when they do, they get the unexpected bill, and why your Ohio Retired Teacher Association went out and negotiated with the other 3 pensions protection systems, your deal with MASSA. So we can't prevent bad things from happening. We can only be prepared for when they do happen. Bonnie, go ahead.
So Jim has talked a lot about, use the acronym MASSA, so Medical Air Services Association. And, this, like I said early on, one of our tasks here at AMBA is to find solutions to problems. And with the information that Jim has shared, obviously this, medical transportation can be a problem because Jim, as you talked, there's a lot of things that folks don't think about. When you're having an emergency, you dial 911 and you're not going to lay there on your front lawn or, in the middle of the road when you've had a car accident and say, hey, wait, I need a price check, or, hey, I got a Groupon. Okay. So, what can be done? And obviously, you talked about elder care being the #1 most expensive threat. And what I always share is, when it comes to medical transportation, I think that's kind of like the #1 gotcha, because there's so many things that go into it that folks don't even think about. Because let's face it, when we're having an emergency or we're sick, we want help now. So we pick up the phone, dial 911, and then have to deal with the aftermath. And so basically, MASSA, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because it goes far beyond just air services. It's really any ground, any air. So beyond, it could be a helicopter or an air transplant or an air transportation, and really anywhere you are on the planet, except of course for places like Antarctica and the hot spots like Ukraine or North Korea, which in all my years of doing this, Jim, I've never had a retiree say, oh yes, sign me up, I'm going there. So really any air, any ground, and anywhere you are on the planet. And, one of the things that I wanted to take just a moment and explain is really who is MASSA. We talk about the fact that it is the solution to the problem that we presented here today. And, MASSA has been around since 1974. And in all of the years that our associations have worked with MASSA, I'm proud to say that they have not declined a claim on a member, for the actual emergency transportation. They have an excellent rating with the Better Business Bureau of an A+ rating. And, one thing that folks don't understand is they do actually have paramedics, registered nurses, physicians, because if you do find yourself in a situation of needing medical transportation through the air, I mean, this goes beyond the, falling off your porch and breaking your wrist. But if you need help getting transported from point A to point B for those trauma services, MASSA has those skilled folks on staff to help make those arrangements and, help your health team, get that implemented and get you to the place that you need to have the best care that you can get. And then the other thing that a lot of folks don't realize is there are no dollar limits on either the trip or the number of trips that you take when emergency transportation is needed. So as we look here, some people say, well, I'm not planning on traveling anywhere. I don't need this, or, hey, I'm going to buy travel insurance. But keep in mind, the majority of the bills, and this goes back to what Jim was explaining on how the limits are and what's being declined. The majority of the bills that MASSA is paying right now is actually for a ground ambulance trip within a 20-mile radius of your home. And those are the most, and and let me go back here just a second. And folks, I mean, when I can say this assuredly, how MASA works. Back in February of 2020, so right before the world shut down, my son, who you saw there on the earlier picture, was headed back into the high school for lacrosse practice. He was about a mile from home. A deer ran out in front of him, and he totaled his truck. The neighbors called the squad. They came, they picked him up. We know half the folks on the squad because they're either former baseball coaches or neighbors, or, and they said, hey, do you want us to transport him or do you want to take him? 2.3 miles to the hospital. Shattered his nose, blood everywhere, big cut on the leg. I didn't know if he had, a head injury or not. I said, no, you folks just go ahead and take him. After the fact, I got a bill for $688.10. And that was 2.3 miles to the hospital. My first was gas because I'm like, oh my gosh, he's graduating senior. I got all these bills, Jim. You know what it's like to have teenagers. And then I took a deep breath and I said, wait a second, I have MASA. I simply sent the bill in and they covered it. And it was just such a relief, that peace of mind to know that, hey, my family was protected. So again, 2.3 miles came with a big price tag that afternoon. And
Hey,
yeah,
Bonnie,
go ahead.
another thing that's really relevant is for our single widowed retirees that don't have support systems. MASA doesn't only pay the bills, but I mean, if you get into a situation where you're in a traumatic situation and you need medical transport to another facility more capable of treating you, you can call the number at MASA and their domestic department will actually work directly with your charge nurse, the attending ER physician, the destination. They'll help choose the carrier, the fastest, best, and understand that MASA is not a network of ambulances and med flights. It is every ambulance, every advanced life support, every med flight, every fixed wing aircraft that you could possibly need to get the best care as quickly as possible. You take that. When you get the ridiculous bill and Medicare declines it, you send it right into MASA. It doesn't matter who the carrier is. I do joke that they've got 2 or 3 things that they limit. If you are active military, you're required to take military medical transport. They will not pay for bipolar or schizophrenic personalities dialing 911 out of spite. There are some, you can only have 2 fixed wing aircraft at $50,000 a pop. You can only have 2 of those per anniversary year. We've never had anybody have more than 2 in 1 year. If you do, you got a lot bigger problems than your MASA, association plan. But just understand how important these plans are. Without them, unfortunately, you're the one that's making those arrangements, trying to choose the carriers, what makes the most sense, who goes where. Are we getting the best deal with MASA? You don't have to do anything but rely on them, and then they'll also cover your expenses.
And Jim, that's interesting that you talk about the cost, and hopefully our folks out here today really haven't had to face those bills like my family did, or like the folks that we have run into. But when we talk about just the cost of an ambulance, as we see here, there is a base fee. What does it take to just get it out on the road? And here on this screen, we can see that's almost $1,300. And then there's a mileage charge, just like you were renting a car. And as we see here on the bill, what was covered, what wasn't covered. And then the big thing, the pay this amount. I mean, those are 4 scary words, for folks, pay this amount. In this situation, it was a 20-mile ride. They were left to pay over $1,300. And then down here, sort of the same type of thing, just 9 miles was over $1,000. So these can be pretty expensive Uber charges. You mentioned that earlier. And then one of the things that's really interesting when we talk about, again, the cost of air ambulances, and sometimes, Jim, I get folks that say, well, I pay my taxes. My local township is going to come and pick me up. I do the spaghetti dinners. I make sure I vote for the levies and everything else. But sometimes they are still having to send bills beyond what insurance will cover. And one of the things that you touched on just there a moment ago was when Narcan is involved. If you live in a community which has a large drug problem, think about the cost of those, how that is impacting the budgets for our local companies or our local townships and fire departments. emergency services. And then also think about what's the cost of gas done in the last 18 months. So, their expenses have gone up too. And then we were having this conversation the other day, my husband and I, and it was like, man, if we're complaining about the cost at the pump, what is the cost of a gallon of fuel for a helicopter? Think about that one. And Jim, I know you're a motorhead, but as we think about what's the cost for an air ambulance, we can see here on the bottom, Jim talked about a rotor charge. Starting price just to fire up folks on this example was over $33,000. And then they added on all of these other types of things that was happening. And folks, these are examples from our retirees that we have worked with. So you can see down here, the 41,000 minus the 33,000, which was covered. The balance due was over $8,000 to this retiree. And then this is one, we talked about anywhere. So here was a couple that had actually vacationed in Hawaii. The gentleman, unfortunately, had a massive stroke while they were on their dream vacation, and MASA worked to get them home. And unfortunately, when he did get home, he ended up passing away. But the total cost for the air ambulance to transport them, from Hawaii back to their home was over $58,000. And MASA took care of that. They paid that 100%. And then if you're thinking, well, I don't go to Hawaii and I don't live in Florida, but here's one of our retirees from just across the border over in Indiana. Her husband had to be life flighted, and their bill was over $38,000. They simply sent the bill in and it was taken care of. And then as far as here in Ohio, this retiree had her husband about cut his leg off with a chainsaw. A 17-minute flight to Miami Valley, which is our other level 1 trauma center here in this part of the world, cost over $21,000. This retiree was so happy that she had gotten the MASA program because it actually took care of that bill. Because that's where I say, it's the number one gotcha. So with the MASA program, it does supplement your current health and coverage, and it gives you that complete financial protection, whether you're at home or away from home. And as Jim said, you're not going to call MASA, you're going to dial 911, get the help that you need. And then when all of the icky stuff comes later on, that's where MASA kicks in and helps to cover. And MASA goes beyond just the local ground transportation. It is that emergency air transportation, whether that's a helicopter. And as you saw in the New York Times article, the average cost for a helicopter was over $40,000. It could be, flying you back home after you've broken your hip in Florida. It could be the ground ambulance. If you're outside the United States, MASA does help get you back in to the country. Handles the return transportation, escort transportation. If you travel with your grandbabies at all, leave the parents at home and travel with the grandbabies, MASA will make sure that the kids get back home too. And even if you have any little fur babies out there, they'll make sure that your pets, up to 2 pets, get home also. And then, unfortunately, we have folks that have taken, that bucket list trip, and the worst possible thing happens. They have passed away. MASA will make those arrangements and pay for those folks to get back home for burial. They also cover any type of organ retrieval or the organ recipient transportation. And again, basically wherever you are on the planet, it's going to take care of that. And so the other thing that comes if you do decide to do a 5-year or a lifetime membership, you do get your little medic Id bracelet, and I've got mine on, and Jim's probably got his. But basically, you can go to their website, put on the information, a picture of you, who your emergency contacts are, your doctors, your medical history, your medications, and why this is important. If something happens, like your Gahanna lady, and she's laying in the middle of her front yard, the neighbor calls, now the squad shows up, and they don't know who she is or who they need to call, if she has a DNR, if she has medications. A lot of times they'll run in and go through the refrigerator or the box on the counter and try to figure out what medicines they're on. With this, basically those first responders who are trained to look for these types of things will simply take out their smartphones, scan that QR code, and now they know who you are, who they need to call, and your medical history, so they can actually begin treatment quickly instead of having to wait. So, you might be saying, well, why do I need MASA? Well, it's actually the best coverage that is available for the home or wherever you travel to the United States, international, ground or air transportation. And because you folks are members of the Ohio Retired Teachers Association, remember earlier I said membership has its privileges. They actually will waive the $60 membership fee because you're a member of ORTA. And there is a group negotiated discount on your MASA membership that saves you 40%. So folks, right there, that's paid really for your Ohio Retired Teachers Association membership. And so remember, if you're out of country, you do actually just let them know where you're going, because if something happens, and I don't know about you folks, but my Spanish isn't very good. So I always have this vision, if I, go to Mexico on a family vacation, I could break my leg and they could be, talking about amputating it. And all I know how to do is ask where the bathroom is and order a beverage. MASA will actually send a translator to be with you, and they can tell you where the best places are to go to get the best treatment. So,
Hey, Bonnie.
Yeah, go ahead.
One other thing that I'll share is a lot of our members don't think about this, but we get these calls with people out of the country, and they don't realize that when they deal with a medical event, that their Medicare doesn't work outside of the US, especially of a PPO Advantage plan like the Aetna our members are on. MASA, when you deal with any event, I don't care if you're on a cruise or you're actually in Europe or China, MASA is going to come get you, bring you back, and the minute you hit LA, New York, Detroit, or Galveston, Texas, customs, your Medicare kicks back in. So, I mean, that they're charged with getting you back to the States as quickly as possible to where your Medicare kicks in and reduces your out-of-pocket exposure from having that event outside of the US. Thanks.
Yep. No, and thanks, Jim. And again, folks, our job today is to make sure that you're aware of, the limits that there are on your coverage. And Jim, that's an excellent point. The other thing, sometimes folks will tell me is, well, hey, I'm buying, trip insurance. And there was actually a report on the Today Show yesterday about, folks are starting to travel again, and they're doing the trip insurance. So a couple things that I picked up on that I do want to share with our attendees today. If you do look into that, remember that trip insurance will only cover you for the time period that you're away, not the other 50 or 51 weeks a year. And it also may be limited on what it will cover. If you're getting it because you hear the airlines are canceling planes. They actually talked to one lady who had put in her claim, and it was denied because the airlines canceled it. It wasn't because she had a medical emergency or she had to cancel for some reason. So as you look into those things, make sure you really do read the fine print. And then just know, with the MASA program that we have here, it will take care of getting you back to home. And it covers you the entire year, not just the time that you're away from home. And as the slide shows here, we got the question in Q&A that says, well, this sounds wonderful. I want to make sure that my family's protected. But, if I want to get it, what's it actually going to cost me and how do I do this? So you can see here really again, membership has its privileges, because as an association member for a single person, like Jim talked about earlier, MASA is just $27 a month. So folks, that's less than a cup of coffee at the gas station, not even the frou-frou coffee at the designer coffee houses. And then to cover maybe you and your spouse together, that is just $35 a month. And perhaps we have folks out here that still have minor age children at home. The entire family, like in my case or in Jim's case, the entire family is covered for just $35. And then we talked about the 5-year and the lifetime memberships, where you do get your little medic ID bracelets. You can see the pricing there. And really, again, membership does have its privileges. And, you know, as we've talked today, you know, have been you know, Jim referenced the cuts to Medicare. We've referenced, you know, how different plans work, whether Medicare supplements, whether Medicare Advantage plans. And we know that, you know, the time of year is coming up where you do get bombarded by telemarketers and by, you know, a lot of mail and everything that way. And there are going to be a lot of changes coming with the state sponsored plan too. So, you know, Jim and I and the rest of the folks that we work with here in Ohio, you know, that's what we do on a daily basis, is do these benefits checkups. So I would strongly encourage everyone to, you know, take your phones out, put it in camera mode, hover over the QR code, and, you know, so Jim or I can contact you and get your benefits checkup scheduled. Jim, you know, have we had any questions there in the chat that we need to address?
Hold on. Does the insurance pay for transportation back to your home from being in a hospital or emergency room? Unfortunately, no, they do not. Emergency medical transport is a one-way trip, unless you purchase, return transportation. And again, Medicare will typically cover you to your closest hospital in a basic life support situation. But after that, that's where you've got skin in the game. Great
That's
question.
right. No, that is a great question. And then Jim, I've also had the question before, you know, does Medicare pay for, or would MASSA step in if I had to go to dialysis, you know, back and forth? And, you know, the key here is emergent or emergency transportation. And that's more of a medical transport instead of an emergent medical transport. So we do want to make that designation there. Folks, are there any other questions out there? You know, we do, you know, say, hey, put it in chat. My email is here on the screen now. You know, so if you want, you can go ahead and send questions like that directly to me or to Jim. You know, he is jim.cain, and that's spelled CAIN. At amba.info. And also, if we have some local chapter leaders out there, and if you folks have, you know, have a place on your docket for a speaker, you know, we're more than willing to, you know, come out and meet with your local folks and help explain some of these things, because there have been a lot of changes with coverage and Medicare. And as you saw early on in the presentation, you really have to be a good medical consumer. So our job, again, is to make sure that none of our retirees are blindsided. And we sure don't want you, you know, paying money that you don't have to, because as Jim said earlier, you can't exactly call Columbus and say, hey, send me a couple more pension checks. So Jim, anything else for the program today?
You know, the only other thing that I would add is we have a lot of members that unfortunately don't reach out to us because of because of health issues. They dealt with cancer, they dealt with pulmonary events, they dealt with heart events, and they don't think they're eligible. Where for the elder care plans, you've got to be stable for a year or 2 or 3 to qualify for them. The funnel is a lot wider than our members believe. MASSA is guaranteed issue because statistically, we will all use some emergent medical transport. It's the only product in the state's portfolio for all 4 pension protection systems that is guaranteed issue. And if you think about this, our members that unfortunately cannot qualify for elder care services, those are the folks that because of their health situation are using more medical transport. So if you think, hey, I've got all these health concerns, I'm not going to qualify for this, you're the folks that, you know, these were designed for. It's guaranteed issue. If you are tore up from the floor up and you're using medical transport, they may have a 90-day, you know, pre-existing condition. But if you use medical transport in the past and it's kicked your bottom financially, absolutely look into this. Call Bonnie, call me. It will not be anybody else, you know, that'll be contacting you. It will be one of us directly. So understand that. We do train some other folks within the state. So you may have somebody in the background that we're working with because we manage and we've had to grow our teams based on, you know, COVID and doing this all virtually. But just understand that it is guaranteed issue. MASSA does not turn anybody down, and statistically we'll all use it.
So folks, with that, we hope you enjoyed the program today. Hopefully we have given you a lot of good information. We do encourage you to share this with your friends and family. And again, we will be sending you out the benefit sheet for everyone who attended today. So you can see, all of the great group negotiated benefits, and even more importantly, any of the benefits, discounts and other benefits that you're entitled through to by being a member of the Ohio Retired Teachers Association. So with that, Jim, thank you today, and thank you to everyone else who has joined us.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie, and thank you everybody for your service and support of ORTA. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you in another month for the next installment.